What has happened is this control of information was challenged, and that's what they're trying to shut down now. But the point that I would make to people is that, you know, when I go around the world, and I have done since 2016, I've presented this talk in 4 sections. And particularly in the first section, I lay out what the agenda is. You mentioned Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 out of the United Nations, justified, by the way, by the global warming hoax, which has been orchestrated through the United Nations. And I've gone through what the plan is for human society, some of which has happened since I started the tour. And what I've done when I've gone into different countries is I've had a checklist of these various facets of the global agenda that they want to introduce. And so I go into a country maybe 5 days early, and I look at what's happening in that country, and I go through this checklist. Is it happening? Is it happening? Well, when I've gone into any culture, any area of the world, Australia, Europe, the Balkans, America, Canada, and Scandinavia, etc., it's been tick, 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 tick. It's happening everywhere. So unless people are believers in extraordinary levels of coincidence, it's centrally organized. There's a central controlling force globally that has its satellites in different countries, and those satellites have the job, they're networks of secret societies and stuff, they have the job of introducing the centrally dictated agenda in their country. And it's happening everywhere, because America is where it's happening, all of it's happening, because that's a mind control laboratory. That's where they
first, and then it's coming to other countries.
Yes, exactly. You know, people say, "Oh, you know, American culture's everywhere." Well, why? One of the key reasons is they try it out. I feel sorry for Americans. They're in a mind control laboratory. Increasingly, other countries are too, of course, but that's the prime one. And what they do, whether it's fast food, whether it's fast news, I'll come back to that in a second. Whatever asset of this is, GMO, etc., the radiation agenda, the technology transhumanist agenda, they test it out in America. Why 5G, which is an incredibly destructive new radiation communication system that they're bringing. They're starting in America. So
you have to explain that, because it's like mobile phone. We have 3G, 4G now. We have 4G, and 5G is coming from satellites all over the world.
Yeah, 5G is a big step up on the microwave destructive impact, both on the mind and on the body of health, that they're introducing as the new communication system, basically. And it's starting in America, and they've announced in America they're introducing it, and then they're not having any studies on its impact on health or its impact on human thinking, because if they did, people would go, "You're having a laugh, we're not having that." So they just don't do it. But it's all coming out of America. So if it works in America, then it's exported around the world. And people say, "Oh, the American culture's everywhere." No, what is everywhere is what has worked in America in this control system, both quote physically and mentally and emotionally, has worked in America. Now they're exporting it, and so you see it everywhere, because this is centrally coordinated. And we're now entering a whole new phase of this, where in every area of its ambitions, they are pushing it on faster and faster. And this is a kind of a big reason for that. I said years ago that what I was talking about, that was happening under the radar, and this was the plan, it had to break the surface eventually. You can't transform human society in the way you want it unless at some point you start transforming human society where people can see it. So this is breaking the surface now. It's one of the reasons more and more people are waking up, because they're looking around and saying, well, I'm feeling very uneasy about what's going on. What's happening? And so there's that point where they break the surface. And then there's the point which they want to head to where alternative information and any alternative view is so locked down, so silenced, that information challenging the official narrative will not be circulating. And they want to make that the distance between those 2 points as small as possible, because the longer it is, the more time, as this stuff comes in and people say, well, what's going on? And people say, actually, this is going on, and they're going, well, actually, that makes sense. What are we going to do? The longer that distance is, the more that will happen. And they're trying to squeeze it. And that's why they're rushing on with this in so many areas all the time.
What an important message from you is that what we are is much more than what I see. You're not David the writer, I'm not Joe the writer, or taxi driver, or whatever. It's not what I define myself as, my job, my money, my car, whatever. But that we are spiritual beings and that we are part of the all that there is, and we are in this body, but we are not the body. So if we understand that, and those forces keep us from understanding that, are people waking up to this consciousness?
Well, I think that's part of it. I mean, when we talk about people waking up, there's different levels of it. Some people wake up to the fact they're being lied to about world events, and they go that far initially. And other people are going much deeper and re-evaluating their self-identity. See, this control of perception, which is everything. Control perception, you control the person. A fundamental bottom line foundation of this control of perception is control of perception of self, control of perception of self-identity. They don't want us to realize that we are not our body, we are not our name, we are not our race, we are not our religion, we are not our income bracket. They are experiences which the true I is having. And that true I is simply a state of awareness, a state of being aware. You know, I'm sitting here and I'm communicating through a body. What's the body doing? It's locking my attention, my point of attention, into that visible light realm, so that it is decoding the body, the brain, the genetic structure in general is the DNA is because it's a receiver transmitter of information, as it's becoming more and more accepted. It's locking my point of attention into this narrow band of frequency called visible light. What is having that experience is my state of awareness. My state of awareness does not have form. I mean, we just go back to this archontic force. That is the same, in the same situation. It's a state of awareness, but a very, very distorted one. That's why it's so evil and so monstrous in its manipulation. But my state of awareness is what's having the experience. When I leave the body, what's leaving the body and what near-death experiences are experiencing when their body dies and then that comes back to life, is they're experiencing a completely different reality when you listen to their endless common tales, because their point of attention, their awareness has left the body. As it leaves the body, that point of attention is no longer confined to that narrow band of frequency that the body is capable of decoding, and that's what we call death. It's actually freedom of freedom from what the Gnostics called the body prison, in effect. And what this manipulative force wants is for us not to understand the true nature of who we are. Because once you realize you are not your experience, and you're not your race, you're not your religion, you're not your income bracket, you're not your culture, they are experiences, well, potential for, and the fact that we are all points of attention within the same infinite field of consciousness, then you lose all basically your fault lines of divide and rule, which self-identity with all those labels allows you to play them off against other labels, which of course is what happens, and then the human race is fighting each other and imposing itself on each other and killing each other. And while they're doing that, this force symbolically is holding the strings to all of them. They don't want us to realize that, because once you realize that you are a point of attention with infinite awareness and not your name and your labels, then suddenly your sense of limitation goes. Because if all we are is a body in a physical world, because this world is of course not physical, just an illusion, holographic, then everything is I can't, everything is it's not possible. But once you realize that this is, we're just having an experience, that the I is that which is having the experience, and we are infinite and eternal in our endless journey of experience, then suddenly you see yourselves in terms of your power. You see yourselves in a completely different way. Now I am the point of power, because now if I'm the one having the experience, I can control the experience. Once you think you are the experience and your labels, the labels and the experience is controlling you. So there's been this suppression. This is why when you know you might call the Western powers went on their colonial journeys around the world, they targeted the shamans and the people that held this knowledge in the ancient communities and brought it through the cultural communication systems about the fact that we are just awareness and this is just an illusion and we're just having experiences. They targeted them. In the words of a great friend of mine, Credo Mutwa, now in his 90s, a high Zulu shaman in South Africa, when the British came into South Africa, they, quote, milked the minds of the shamans and they killed them because they didn't want this knowledge. They wanted to put a year zero on this knowledge and not have it circulating. And so to replace this ancient understanding of reality and the nature of self, they created the networks of mainstream science. And of course mainstream science was based from the start in the fact that we are our bodies, this world is just physical, it is real. Any experiences that people have outside of that are paranormal and nonsense. It's been a lockdown on the global perception of self and who we are, and not just part. I would say the most fundamental part of the world waking up is for people to go beyond world events are not like we're told they are and into this understanding of nature of self, because it transforms everything. And you know, ancient writings in many parts of the world talk about this manipulative force in terms of the fact that it's terrified that humanity will wake up and remember its true nature, because then it's all over. They have to hold us in this perceptual prison cell from cradle to grave, and that's why they have to control the flow of information. They created the education system to download a narrow perception of reality to children from the earliest age. This is what it's all about, and when you put the dots together, it's just an open book what's happening.
You're referring a lot to the Matrix movies, which I think are also very interesting. There's this Mr. Anderson, who's working in an office insurance company or whatever and thinks he has a normal life, and what he sees his office does is the world. And then there is someone who says, what if I told you that this is not really what you are? And so that's pretty exciting because it shows exactly what you're talking about. Do those people who make the Wachowski brothers or whatever.
Yeah, Wachowski brothers, yeah.
Do they know what's going on, and do they want to show it to us, or is it just sci-fi and a coincidence? Do they want us to wake up?
Well, I don't know in terms of them what their motivations were. What I would say is I would be staggered, given the nature of the movies, if they didn't know what was going on. Yeah. And for instance, there was a real cult movie I mentioned in the talks, came out in the 1980s called They Live. Yeah. And They Live was produced, in fact he did everything, I think he wrote the music, everything, by a guy called John Carpenter. And when you follow his movie history, he clearly knows what's going on. He's done a lot of Satanist stuff in movies and stuff. And a few years ago, before he died, the star of that program, that movie, which was about the fact that he discovered that humanity had been infiltrated and was being controlled by a non-human force that were hiding behind human form, just like the American military hid in the blue bodies of the Na'vi blue people in the Avatar movie and infiltrated their society, while the Na'vi thought they were them. This is what's happening. These bloodlines, this 1% and the royal bloodlines, the aristocratic bloodlines that are now in dark suits and all that stuff, the reason they incessantly interbreed with each other is because they're trying to hold basically a biological software program, which is the particular way that they function and dictates their personality. It's why they have no empathy. That's why they do things that the rest of humanity would be destroyed by doing, like bombing the innocent from the sky day after day. And this They Live movie actually depicted this. And this guy, played by Roddy Piper, former famous wrestler in America, realized this.
He found sunglasses.
Yeah, the basic story was that he discovered some sunglasses which were made by other groups that are also realized this. And when he put the sunglasses on, and he looked at certain people and they were still human, but he looked at others, almost all in positions of power, though not all, and he saw them for what they were, what was hiding inside that human body, and it was absolutely not human. But where I'm leading with this, in terms of the question about the Matrix and do they know, Roddy Piper said in this interview many years after the movie came out that They Live was not a movie, it was a documentary, because they were depicting something that's actually happening. And so there are people who are aware. Now then you ask the question, what's their motivation? Because there's two ways of looking at it, and there will be some that are positively motivated, no doubt about it. But there's two ways of looking at it. One, that, yeah, they're trying to get the information out. But there's something else which is called preemptive programming. And I talked about this yesterday, briefly. The world that they want to bring in of control of the human mind by artificial intelligence. So there is no human mind. We just become vehicles for artificial intelligence, which does all our thinking and perceiving. That's what transhumanism is really all about. It is so fantastic and so different to what we've had before that, of course, there's that chasm of what people have been used to where they want to take us, and not in a long time from now either. There's that resistance. I don't like this. What's going on? So if you notice, I've been noticing this for years and years and years. Movie after movie comes out which depicts the very world that I'm talking about, and the transhumanist AI-controlled world that we're talking about. And it's like, oh, they're trying to tell us then. Well, hold on a minute. What that's doing, it's making the subconscious familiar with that world. So when they bring it in for real, which is where they want to go, people are not so resistant because somehow it's a world far more familiar to them because of all the movies and all the television programs that have depicted that very AI, robot technology controlled
Terminator
reality.
Events, the Hunger Games, that's what they want us
Yeah,
to be. And
they're programming familiarity with what they want, so they dilute resistance to it as they bring it in. That's what preemptive programming is all about.
And so they show us the pictures, so we visualize them in our dreams, and we are creators, actually. And when we get these pictures imposed on us, then we create this future, probably. But people are waking up, or should wake up, so that these things shouldn't happen.
Well, that's an interesting point, Joe, because I've actually gone into that very thing in Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. Where I pointed out that we are being manipulated, as you rightly say, we are being manipulated to create the world they want. And it kind of works like this. Our perceptions, whatever they are interacting with what people call the quantum field of possibility and probability. All around us is this teeming field of possibility, probability, and our perceptions dictate what part and what range of this possibility and probability we actually connect with, and therefore decode through the brain and genetic and DNA decoding systems into a reality that we experience. This is why, in the simplest terms, someone who sees everything as with the glass half full will experience a life that will express that perception of the glass half full. Oh, nothing ever happens to me, everything goes wrong. Yeah, but you're creating it. This is what they don't want us to know. They don't want us to know that our perceptions are creating our reality. Because if we knew that, we could change our perceptions and change our reality. This information must not be circulated. This is, you can have all the revelations about surveillance and all the revelations about banking, all the revelations about the manipulation of war, all of which are important, we should know about. The biggest thing they're terrified of is humanity knowing that our perceptions create our reality. So, if they can download a perception of the world and the way the world is going to our perceptual processes, we, as you've indicated, we literally, collectively, play a major part in manifesting that reality. That's why I've said in the book, don't accept that what I'm describing here that they want to do is inevitable. Don't accept that, because if you do, you're going to play your part in creating it. So yes, absolutely right. But look how far we've gone, Joe, in just a short time, from what people hear on the evening news or read in the paper, which is all reporting the world from I call it the postage stamp consensus, this narrow band of limited perceptions of the world. Look how far we've gone already, and we, of course, talk for long enough, you're going to go over the horizon in terms of how far you're going to go away from what people are told from cradle to grave the world is all about, before we really understand the full nature of actually what's happening in that narrow band of what we call human society.